under modules, you should see chapter 1. And I do have some notes here. These are my notes for chapter 1. So I want to go over some of the notes first, and then we're going to jump in and start coding. Right, so we got a PDF of my, or a PowerPoint of my notes, whatever you guys prefer. Actually, I'm going to do probably better if I do this, right? All right, so how many of you, if not those of you who have already had web design, but coming from high school have played around with HTML at all? Probably a lot of you, right? No? What? That's shocking, Duke. You're going to love it. Generally, HTML is very intuitive, a lot of the things. So I want to talk about some of the basics, right? So what does it stand for? Hypertext markup language, where hypertext meaning you can link to other pages. And the way I think of markup is, let's say you write a paper for your English class, your writing class, right? You write this whole paper. And you're thinking it's pretty good, but then the professor gets a hold of it and they mark it up and they do, red ink all over. The way I think of HTML is you have your markup just like on the paper you wrote for class, right? You have what the professor wrote all over it. But really the content or the body is what you wrote, the paper you wrote. That is what hypertext markup language is all about. There's content that displays on the page, and then there's markup that does not display on the page. The markup tells the browser what each of the elements on your page mean, right? So you could have a paragraph. You could have a heading. Take a look at our web page. This is a problem. Can I move this? There we go. Right, so if you take a look at our web page, you should see different objects on this page. Right, we talk about object-oriented programming all the time. What are some of the objects you would see on this page? Navigation bar, right? So the navigation bar, there's actually more than one. You have this going across the top with a little drop-down menu. When you hover your mouse over it, there's interactivity, right? You see this navigation bar here. What else do you see as an object on this page? The picture, yes, all the images, right? What's the interest on the page? What makes a good web page? Sometimes it's the color, the picture. Now, personally, and I don't know if you agree with me, I think our pictures are way too big. You have to scroll down for everything, and it is really frustrating. So as an end user, I think there are some user-friendly things that we could do to change this page. And I always ask programmers to think about the end user. Right? It's not about you. It's not about you as the programmer, what makes your life easier. It is about the solution you're designing for someone else. So for example, this is what frustrates me as an end user. I go to Banner, not often, but often enough. Where is the little push button for Banner? Way down here, right? That's not intuitive. But again, let's go back to listing some of the objects you see on this page. What else? Actually, I just said one. The buttons, right? The buttons on the page, and they'll link you to another page. Now, all of this content, the buttons, the navigation bar, the images, the headings, the paragraphs, these are all elements defined in your HTML. The look and feel, the font size, the colors you're using is defined by what? The CSS, right? So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. That is another language, arguably more complex things to remember and creativity to use. When you're working with a web page, but the CSS is what's defining the look and feel, right? So those are two different languages with two different objectives. Now, what you'll find in HTML is a lot of times the things you can do in CSS or even in JavaScript can be done by HTML. And that gets really confusing. It's confusing for a programmer. It's confusing for the next person that comes and corrects whatever code you wrote or changes code you wrote. So what I like to tell students is always think about the intent of the language. If the intent of the language is to define content, which HTML, that's the intent, then just define content. Don't start changing your font size in your HTML. It's just going to get confusing for you to find where you put that, right? If the intent of the CSS is to style your page, then that's what you should use it for. And then JavaScript, finally, will be to add some interactivity to your page, right? Based on an event, have something happen. And when we talk about object-oriented programming, what we're talking about is treating each of these elements on the page as an object, so that when the user clicks on that button on that object, that is an event, right? A click is an event, and that event will trigger some code in JavaScript. Like I said, there are things you can do that you can do in HTML. You don't need JavaScript for. If I click on a button, I can send it to another page. That's something I can accomplish with HTML. But maybe you want to add some interest, changing the size of the font, the color, and you can do all of that. Again, it can be done with CSS, and it can be done with JavaScript. Okay. I forgot where I was. What were we talking about? Ah, yes, these three. All right, so as I said before, the HTML defines the structure of the page, defines what the content of the page is. Note that your HTML is not case sensitive, but most of the time you'll see lowercase for the tags, for all of that. We use the term tags. The tags identify and are the markup. And I'll show you and demonstrate that in just a minute. Okay, and before we start coding ourselves, let's take a look at this guy, just as an example. Let me blow this up. Right, now this page here doesn't have any images, it doesn't have a lot of color, but it's still a web page. And the different things, the different elements that you see on this page include the heading, the paragraph, all of these items that are labeled. Bulleted list, paragraph. Each of these are individual objects that you can attach CSS to, that you can attach JavaScript to. So defining them as their own element is what gives you that flexibility. So let's try that out ourselves.